As she walked through the city, the streets grew louder with the stomps of feet that percussed from the people and the screeches of tyres that berated the ears and brakes of the cars and hovercrafts that sound like nails on a chalkboard. Bune had slowly come to life. Her marbled eyes darted at the sights and sounds around her, and she gathered every detail from them, noting what was happening and where it was happening. She then saw a sign that read Ark and turned down the quiet street. The buildings were old and had seen generations come and go. The brick clad in sandstone as well as brick clad in marble structures ran down the entire road, each having a distinct purpose, and all waving the flag of Saoirse. Time had weathered them and the buildings, but their presence was as bold as the tallest skyscrapers. In front of her institute was a bronze statue of a man named Alexander, who held a sword in his right hand and rode on the back of a lion. Underneath them was a map of the world with writing that read, "Upon the conduct of each depends the fate of all." She tapped the lion on the head as if to pat it, and walked up the steps for her hoplology lesson. The rooms were lit with clear bulbs whose filaments burned bright. Inside the historic building were busts of the greatest military strategists from all nations and all eras, and mounted on the walls were paintings 20 to 30 feet in length with a width just as long, of battles that changed the tides of war. The cherry oak floors looked untouched, but she could hear their age as they creaked and whined at their points of weakness. She entered a large room with red wooden beams whose walls were dressed in sculpted maps. In the middle of the room was a round table with a large opening at its centre. Lorena took her seat and unpacked her study materials. Seconds later, her teacher walked into the war room. He was an older man with dark skin and very short grey hair. His eyes were dark and deep, and paralleled his voice. He had a faint but noticeable scar that ran down his lips. The man's appearance, even in old age, was menacing, but his spirit was of humility and extreme kindness. "General Westmore?" She greeted him cordially. "Good evening, Lorena. How's your day going?" he asked in his sunken baritone voice. "It's been tough but productive. Just how I like it. How's your day been?" she asked him. "Quiet and peaceful. Just how I like it. Are you ready for today's lesson?" Westmore asked. "Let's get to it," she said optimistically. The general synced a device he wore on his wrist to the table Lorena was sitting at. The edge of the table illuminated a neon blue, signaling the device was paired, and projected a three-dimensional map in the center of the round table. The map quickly narrowed into a city that was barricaded with 20-foot walls, with an army of 30,000 men. Just outside the walls of the great city was an opposing army of only 10,000 men. "So, Lorena, this is one of the most iconic battles in all of history. This is—" Westmore was cut off. "The Battle of Jericho," Lorena interrupted. "Indeed it is," he said with admiration in his voice. "Now, do you know how the Telkenites were able to siege the entire city while only losing 1,000 men?" "I don't know much of the battle at all, except that the sound of their arrival rattled the bones of the enemy and quickened their hearts and made the mind mad with fear. All the romantic and poetic gestures you see in the reels," she answered. "Well, I can tell you there's no romance in battle. There's only the cold blade of tragedy. Nor is there poetry to war, only the prose of reality. The saving grace in war, with all its faults, is truth. For in the end it always rises," General Westmore lectured. "Sounds like you have a romantic relationship with it," she teased the general. "We are merely acquaintances in the epic of time," he said with a slight grin on his face. "Now let's discuss how General Joshua Nunn was able to sack a city while outnumbered 3-1, and did so in just 2 days' time." The lesson went on for an hour and a half, and covered several key issues about the battle, from advanced weaponry to cutting off supply routes, starving the occupants out, and ransacking the city at incredible speed with uncanny precision. The neural pathways within Lorena's mind traveled like lightning, moving through the storm of a cloud, and struck the prefrontal cortex, welding it to memory. "Well, our time is up." The general handed her a book. "I want you to read chapters 8 and 9. They're not too long, maybe 30 to 35 pages. We'll talk about them in the next lesson." "I'll see you in a few days, General." She placed the book in her already full bag.
Have a good night, sir.
She leaned into the gentle giant and gave the old man a hug.
Oh, I almost forgot. My dad said he wanted to talk to you and to give him a call. He also said to give you this.
She unzipped a small pocket on the front of her bag and handed him a folded piece of paper in the shape of a star. Thank you, Lorena. I'll be sure to call him. The teacher and the student parted ways, and once more Lorena was back in the algid air. She put on a pair of soft pink and white mittens and pushed on the wrist of her glove, warming them to warm her hands. The stars were out, but they were barely visible as the buildings and street lights outshined their glory. She had walked a few blocks and was about to take the stairs leading to the train underground when she heard a familiar honk and howl. She looked up and saw the cherry-red convertible glistening in the streetlights. "Luli!" came a shout from the car. She walked towards it and rolled her eyes.
Hey, eh? What are you doing here?
She asked her brother. "Was just heading home and thought you might need a ride. Hop in," he told her.
Thanks, eh?
Lorena smiled. "Anything from my favourite sister," he said as if he had another. The power of the car shook their bodies as it reverberated through Buna Ithwa. Soon the glimmer of the city lights faded away, and the luminescence of the stars guided them home. The siblings opened the palace doors of the fabled castle they called home. As they entered the room of seasons, their eyes were drawn to the leaves hanging from the birch trees that filled the entryway, as they displayed a rainbow of colours with the dim lights of the lamprog resting on their white branches. Lorena and Idas walked the ancient and glorious halls, and passed rooms the size of houses until they reached Absalom, who was in the dining room setting the table for his family, while singing a traditional Sirsha song that struck the drum of the ear in a pitch that was offsetting. Lorena and Idas looked at each other and laughed at his wretched melody. "It's better than the lot of you can sing," said Absalom. Idas and Lorena's stomachs began to ache from the rapid tightening of the ab muscles as they giggled with fervour.
Idas, is that you?
Yelled a voice from the other room.
"Yes, Mum. Some girl is with me, too. She's a bit weird, but I think you'll like her,"
he answered. Lagertha came through the door of the other room with a grand smile on her face that quickly turned to a frown of disappointment.
"Oh, I thought you might have actually brought a girl home. Way to get my hopes up. But you're right, I do like the girl next to you very much," she said.
"Were you downstairs helping to cook?" asked Lorena.
"Of course. You know I don't consider myself above anyone. Besides, I thought Mrs. Coquer could use some help in the kitchen," Lagertha said. "Now, sit down. Dinner is coming up."
"Hey, Dad," Lorena said as Robert walked through the same door his wife had come from.
"Hey, Lolo, how was your day?"
he asked.
"You know, the usual. Very busy and very productive. How was yours?" she asked.
"About the same. Maybe with a little more stress." The doors to the dining room swung open, and the food smelled of autumn spices as it spun around the dinner table, setting the room in a cosy and relaxing state, full of love and bliss. The evening passed on as they talked about their days and what tomorrow held. They laughed at one another and with one another until their stomachs were full and their minds tired.
"Hey, Lo, I have something for you.
Good luck with this one." Robert handed her an envelope.
"Is it a riddle?" she asked. "Or a puzzle?"
"You'll see when you open it. Let me know when you solve it," her father answered. It wasn't long until the family grew weary from the long day and set themselves to bed. As the family slept, Lorena lay awake looking at the envelope her father had given her and slid her finger across its seal, revealing its contents. Inside was a sheet of paper. She looked at it, turned it over, looked at its corners and its borders, but nothing was there. There was no writing, no drawing, it was blank. She thought it could be some sort of riddle, and in her thoughts her eyes began to droop and her mind began to wander. She put the paper back inside the envelope, closed her green-blue eyes, and let the subconscious consume the conscious.